What's up peeps, Rockskull here. In this video we're going to be sitting by the warm fire and Christmas tree while I tell you a quick summary of every Overwatch 2 hero's lore, up to Hazard. Big credit goes to the official Overwatch website for these summaries, as I mainly just stole from it, adding or removing a couple things I felt necessary. Let's begin with the tanks. Starting around 2 decades ago, South Korea was attacked by a group of robots called the Krishin, who would cause catastrophic damage to coastal cities before being driven back beneath the waves. In response, the South Korean government developed a mechanized armored drone unit called Mecha to protect urban environments in future engagements with the Omnic threat. As the threat continued to adapt, it eventually disrupted Mecha's drone control networks, forcing the military to place pilots in the mechs. Scrambling to find suitable candidates, the government turned to the country's professional gamers, who possessed the necessary reflexes and instincts to operate the mech's advanced weapon systems. One of these pilots was reigning world champion Hana Song, also known as D.Va. Famous for her elite skills, D.Va was a fierce competitor who played to win at all costs, and she quickly grew in skill to become Mecha's top pilot. The global null sector threat eventually emerged in South Korea, and Overwatch helped the Mecha squad fend them off. D.Va obtained a special dispensation from her commander to join up as Overwatch's new guard, assessing the null sector threat alongside Cole Cassidy and his latest recruits. Konde was the son of a wealthy Nigerian family who owned a prosthetic technology company. Well trained and proficient in a wide spectrum of bone-shattering fighting styles, Akande's stellar professional fighting career was cut short with the loss of his right arm during the Omnic crisis. His family's technology could replace his arm, but without the challenge and crucible of competition, Akande felt utterly lost. He searched for something to devote himself to, and it was only when the current Doomfist, Adeyemi, tapped him to join his ranks. Akande was trained by Adeyemi himself and became one of his most trusted confidants, excelling not only because of his physical enhancements, but because he was extraordinarily well suited for the work. It was not long before Talon also recognized his formidable skills. Konde slayed his mentor in an act he thought that was for the good of Talon, and assumed the mantle of Doomfist, taking on both the infamous weapon and the name. Talon understood the new Doomfist was an unmatched strategist, capable of leading both Talon's military arm and its dealings that required more subterfuge. He would be the perfect replacement, and the rest of the organization began to fall in line. Finley was born to veterans of the first Omnic crisis, and at a young age, his mother unfortunately passed away. His father was also absent and unkind, so he often had to fend for himself. He still believed in the system then, hoping joining the military would be a way to leave his past behind him. Tragedy struck Finley, however, when a battle between Overwatch and Talon left a dropship landing in the flat he grew up in. This ended up killing his father, and Finley was trapped for 2 whole days. He barely survived, and this left him a triple amputee. The government gave him basic prostheses, pain medication, and a monthly check to forget what happened, but he never forgave this injustice. With no real way to move on since he lost everything, he ended up finding and joining the Freaks, a group of individuals who constantly fought against what they called the system. One of the group members, Touch Up, gave him major upgrades to his prosthetics that helped him get rid of his pain. This made him find family with the Freaks, and with even more upgrades from an isotope of vanadium they stole, together they attempt to bring down the organizations that brought them down. Des was born and raised in the irradiated outback from the remains of the destroyed Omnium, where she had to constantly fight to survive in such a harsh environment. Every few seasons, Junkrat would host an event called The Reckoning, where anyone could challenge the current reigning monarch as long as they beat any other challengers first. Des participated in one of these events, and tore through everyone including King Hao, the current monarch, kicking him out of the city. Junker Queen became very popular, and she ruled over Junkertown, uniting factions and teaching the locals how to fight the Omnic menace. At a young age, Mauga was part of a Samoan branch of his father's eco-rebel group, the Deep Sea Raiders. In this group, Mauga learned that charisma opens doors, and destruction gets answers. Mauga became a local legend in Samoa, but one of his major battles left him critically wounded. One of the Deep Sea Raider medics performed emergency heart surgery, giving him a second heart beside his organic one. His newfound strength let him be victorious in many fights. As the Deep Sea Raiders' activity died down, Mauga was craving for more action. This led him into finding Akande, the current Doomfist, so he could fight a worthy challenger. The fight ended up in a draw, and Doomfist offered Mauga a place in Talon. He agreed as he would get constant additional cybernetic upgrades. With Talon, he gets to cause all the chaos his heart desires, so he is content within it. For now. The OR-15 robots were created to defend Numbani after the first Omnic crisis, but were however quickly destroyed from an attack by Doomfist. They were then sold off by the government, and a young girl called Ify bought a lot of these parts. She was known for her brilliance in robotics, and created a new robot with personality she called Orisa, with those decommissioned OR-15 parts. Orisa was a clumsy robot at first, still learning the ropes, and she really got tested when Doomfist attacked Numbani again during a concert Lúcio was performing there. Orisa, Ify, and Lúcio successfully propelled his attack, and a talk with Sojourn after made Ify start thinking about major upgrades for Orisa. A bit later, Null Sector started to attack the city as well, and once again Orisa was successful in repelling the attack. Ify then offered Orisa afterwards if she wanted to join Overwatch to help stop the Null Sector problem at its core. She was hesitant, but accepted after seeing the Junies Ify made protect protecting the city well. The Ravager Omnic series was created early in the Omnic Crisis, part of a commander class of Omnics whose role was to lead other Omnics into war. The Ravagers were hated by humans for their ruthlessness in the war, so they were almost driven to extinction. Ramattra was one of these Omnics, and eventually had his awakening in New York. He heard rumors of a mysterious Omnic named Aurora, the first of their kind. Intrigued and seeking direction, Ramattra embarked on a pilgrimage to the Shambhali Monastery in Nepal, a place where Aurora was said to have resided. Ramattra was welcomed by Mandata, and chose to become a monk of the Shambhali, learning about the iris and the importance of coexisting with humans. However, as time wore on, Ramattra failed to see true progress in the monk's mission of peace. The Shambhali urged Ramattra to be patient, but all around him, Ramattra saw his people dying, and no one taking action. Ramattra knew he could follow the Shambhali teachings no longer. He left the temple, seeking out Omnics fighting in secret around the world and protecting them from the abuse of humans. The truths he shared with those he met inspired others, and over time he gained an underground following of these hurt and angry Omnics. Soon Ramatra's forces were large enough to warrant a test. The target was London, to liberate the Omnics there and see how his forces would perform. Null Sector was ultimately defeated by Overwatch, a scenario Ramattra did not anticipate. In addition, Omnics of London did not support the sacrifices on their behalf, going so far as to denounce the actions of Null Sector. It's been years since Ramattra or Null Sector was last seen, but now, for reasons unknown, Null Sector has appeared in the skies over Paris, Busan, and Rio. What's certain is that Ramattra will see his plans for the future of Omnics through, whatever the cost. Reinhardt was part of the Crusaders, battle-hardened warriors who wore massive suits of armor with unique capabilities. Although his mentor, Baldrich von Adler, was Overwatch's first choice to join the agency, Reinhardt was recruited after Baldrich fell in the Battle of Eichenwald. Reinhardt's unique ethics and larger-than-life persona earned the admiration of his peers and superiors alike. Never afraid to speak his mind, he was Overwatch's most vocal supporter and, when necessary, its harshest critic, providing a constant reminder that Overwatch was meant to be a force for good. Having served into his late 50s, Reinhardt was faced with a mandatory retirement from combat operations. Though Overwatch was eventually disbanded, Reinhardt was not content to sit idly while the world fell to disorder. Once again donning his Crusader armor, he vowed to fight for justice across Europe like a knight of old, defending the innocent and winning hearts and minds with the promise of better days to come. He was joined on this mission by his squire, Brigitte Lindholm, daughter of Reinhardt's close friend, Torbjörn. The old knight visited Eichenwald after Winston triggered the Overwatch recall. Brigitte urged him to consider the request carefully, reminding Reinhardt of the poor leadership that kicked him out, and that he had given Overwatch enough. Reinhardt was undeterred. He was called to duty, and a Crusader must always answer the call. Mako Rutledge was one of the many inhabitants of the Australian outback, whose land was seized and used for construction of an omnium. But in the wake of the Omnic Crisis, the government made a controversial move, gifting the land to the Omnics who had nearly destroyed their country, in hopes of establishing a long-term peace accord. This agreement permanently displaced Mako and a large number of the area's residents. Furious over the loss of their homes, Mako and the residents turned to violent rebellion. They formed the Australian Liberation Front and struck against the Omnium and its robot population to take back the lands that had been stolen from them. Events continued to escalate until the ALF sabotaged the Omnium's fusion core, which resulted in an explosion that destroyed the Omnium, irradiated the surrounding area, and littered the outback with twisted metal and wreckage for miles around. Mako watched as his home became an apocalyptic wasteland, and he was forever changed. Adapting to his environment, he donned a mask and took to the broken highways of the outback on his ramshackle chopper. Little by little, his humanity was forgotten. The last vestiges of Mako faded away and the ruthless killer Roadhog was born. A chance encounter with Junkrat and Junkertown forged a lasting partnership, based in part on a 50% cut of the legendary lost treasure. Now, the duo has nothing left but money, useless disguises, and soon to detonate explosives to do heists around the globe. Kelper's life work involved devising a way to harness the power of gravity. Equally known for his groundbreaking research and eccentric personality, he conducted most of his studies from his lab in The Hague. Believing that he was close to achieving his goal, he performed his most important experiment on an international space station, but something went wrong, triggering the brief formation of a black hole. The Kelper was only exposed to its power for a moment, but he suffered serious psychological damage. The area around him began to experience strange fluctuations in gravity, peaking and dropping in time with his reactions. Upon returning to Earth, the Kelper was quarantined in a secret government facility. He was deemed unsafe and detained for years under the name Subject Sigma. Isolated and unable to control his powers, the Kelper retreated into his own mind. He thought he would never see the outside world again. When Talon discovered the Kelper's existence, they sent Reaper, Sombra, and ultimately Widowmaker to infiltrate the facility and break him out. Plan to use his brilliance and research to further their plans. In their custody, the Kelper slowly gained control of his powers. Now, gravity moved according to his will. He was closer than ever to achieving his life's goal, but the same experiment that had opened his mind had also fractured it, and he struggled to keep the pieces together. The Kelper continues to develop his powers in hopes of unlocking the secrets of the universe, unaware that Talon is using him in his research. Uchane Interstellar established the Horizon Lunar Colony as a first step for humanity's renewed exploration of space. Among its residents was a group of genetically enhanced animals that were intended to test the effects of prolonged habitation of space. One gorilla displayed such rapid brain development from the gene therapy that he was taken under the wing of Dr. Harold Winston, Winston, who taught him science and inspired him with tales of human ingenuity. The young gorilla passed his days assisting with the scientists' experiments, watching the distant blue world outside his habitat window, and dreaming of the endless possibilities that awaited him there. But his life was thrown into chaos when the other gorillas led an uprising, killed the mission scientists, and claimed the colony for their own. Taking on the name of his beloved human caretaker, Winston built a makeshift rocket and escaped the base. Unbeknownst to him, Specimen 8, a hamster Winston had befriended named Hammond, had hitched a ride to Earth with him. While Hammond landed in Australia and settled among the Junkers, Winston found a new home with Overwatch, an organization that represented everything he had come to admire about humanity. At Overwatch, Winston developed the Krollner Accelerator technology that anchored Tracer to the present. He, Tracer, and Genji graduated from agent training together, and went on to do many big missions. When Overwatch fell, Winston was distraught and went into seclusion, longing for the golden days of heroism to return. He would soon transfer this longing into action. After the Reaper infiltrated Watchpoint Gibraltar seeking the roster of former Overwatch agents, Winston repelled the Talon operative and sent out a global recall order for the agents of Overwatch to return to duty. Tracer was the first to respond, and he joined her in King's Row. Inspired by their success in London, Winston remained hopeful that ex-Overwatch agents would respond to his recall. But over a year from the recall, only May had joined them in Watchpoint Gibraltar. When Winston intercepted the news of Null Sector attack in Paris, he realized it was likely to be Overwatch's final battle. But Winston's patience and faith were not in vain, as Genji, Mercy, Echo, Brigitte, and Reinhardt joined the fight. As more former Overwatch agents and new blood step forward to answer the call, Winston remains the steadfast beacon of a future worth fighting for. In one of the many experiments carried out at Horizon Lunar Colony, several animals exhibited exponential growth in physical size and brain function, one of those being a hamster named Hammond. Hammond would frequently escape into different parts of the moon base. Though they'd always find him and return to his cell, they never figured out Hammond was busy scavenging and teaching himself the skills of a mechanic on these journeys. The colony was eventually thrown into chaos when some of the gorillas rose up against the human scientists and took control. Not all of the subjects participated, however, and one of the gorillas, Winston, was making a plan to escape to Earth. Winston was unaware that Hammond too was searching for an exit, and had even designed his own escape pod. Winston unknowingly found Hammond's plans in the base's files and got to work. Hammond then built a makeshift capsule and secretly hitched it to Winston's craft as the gorilla blasted off. When the two entered Earth's atmosphere, Hammond broke off and landed in a different location, the wasteland of the Australian outback. Hammond modified his escape pod to enter the lucrative mech battle arena of the scrapyard. Working his way up the ranks, Breaking Ball went from contender to champion. While Hammond journeys into the wider world from time to time, he's found a happy, if somewhat chaotic, home at the Junker Queen's side. After all, as reigning champion of the scrapyard, he has a title to defend. Alexandria lost her father in the war and grew up surrounded by the devastation in Siberia. As she grew older, she swore that she would gain the strength to help her people recover. Alexandria was identified by the National Athletics Program as a potential star. She trained extensively, moving up the ranks while representing her country. Was expected to shatter long-standing records in the upcoming World Championships. But on the eve of the tournament, an attack came from the long-dormant Siberian Omnium, and her village was thrust into war once again. Alexandria immediately withdrew from the competition and rushed home to enlist in the military. In one stroke, she became a sergeant in the Russian Defense Forces and a symbol to her people. She was given an experimental weapon by Katya Volskaya, CEO of Volskaya Industries. The particle cannon deemed too heavy for standard soldiers, but it also required the kind of quick maneuvering and accuracy that Russia's mechanized force couldn't achieve. Zarya fought on the front lines, and saved many lives with the weapon. When the search for new Overwatch operatives brought Cassidy to the frozen front in Novenskoye, Zarya's unflinching defense of her homeland proved that he had found his newest recruit. Together they drove back the Omnic forces swarming from the Siberian Omnium, and Zarya was persuaded to offer her strength as part of the reformed Overwatch, defending her home on a global scale. Born into a wealthy family who owned an arms company, Ashe grew up surrounded by privilege. Her parents paid little attention to her, mostly leaving her in the care of the family's Omnic butler, Bob. But a chance meeting with a local ruffian named Cole Cassidy, and an impromptu string of crimes committed together, opened her eyes to her true calling, being an outlaw. Along with the other founders of the Deadlock Rebels, Ashe started to make a name for herself with bigger and more extravagant heists. Eventually this caught the attention of Overwatch, who busted the rebels and took in Cassidy. The other criminal organizations in the American Southwest wanted a piece of their pie. The encounters often became violent. After years of skirmishes and bloodshed, Ashe called the heads of the major groups together. She used what she'd learned from her parents' business to bring order to these groups. Her proposal was that the gangs could work together, or at least not work against each other. No longer having to focus her energies in squabbles with the other gangs, Ashe wrote her name across the American Southwest with a string of audacious heists and operations that cemented her legacy as an outlaw legend. E-54 robots were originally created for peacekeeping purposes, but during the Omnic crisis, they were turned against their human makers, forming the bulk of the Omnic's rebel army. Following the resolution of the crisis, nearly all of them were destroyed or disassembled. One unique Bastion unit, severely damaged in the final battles of the war, was left forgotten for over a decade. Overgrown with vines and roots and nested upon by small animals, the robot sat inert, seemingly unaware of the passing time. That was until one fateful day, when he unexpectedly reactivated. With his combat programming all but lost, he instead displayed an intense curiosity about the natural world and its inhabitants, finding this in a bird that built a nest where he stood. In his wanderings, Bastion appeared in northern Sweden, where his discovery ignited old fears in the populace. Torbjörn Lindholm, one of the original Bastion unit designers, offered to eliminate him. Amid the hunt, Torbjörn discovered this specific unit was acting counter to his combat directives. Won over by his curiosity and preliminary research, Torbjörn relocated Bastion to his Ironclad guild, helping the robot survive if he followed the rules. Torbjörn freed Bastion from much of his wartime programming and conducted major repairs on several of Bastion's decades-old crumbling systems. When Overwatch shows up in Sweden to fend off Null Sector, he's offered a spot within Overwatch which Torbjörn gladly accepts for him. Cassidy had already made a name for himself as a member of the notorious Deadlock Rebels gang, but he and his associates were busted in an Overwatch sting operation. With his expert marksmanship and resourcefulness, he was given the choice between rotting in a maximum security lockup and joining Blackwatch, Overwatch's cover ops division. He chose the latter, hoping to rewrite his past sins fighting the injustice of the world. As Overwatch's influence waned, rogue elements within Blackwatch sought to bring down the organization and turn it to their own ends. After the destruction of Overwatch's Swiss HQ, Cassidy wanted no part of the infighting. He set off alone, and resurfaced several years later as a gunslinger for hire, fighting for causes he believed were just. After Cassidy received the call to rejoin Overwatch, a nostalgic run-in with Ana Amari had the gunslinger contemplating his future. Presenting with growing security threats around the world and the possibilities afforded by a new team, Cassidy went on a mission to recruit heroes forged from various incursions around the globe. Reinforced with fresh faces, Cassidy and his new recruits are out in full force to strengthen Overwatch's presence worldwide. Prior to joining the organization, Dr. Mina Liao was widely considered one of the preeminent experts in the fields of robotics and artificial intelligence, an employee of Omnica Corporation. There she worked on a team that was responsible for the design and the creation of the Omnics that would later wage war against humanity during the first Omnic crisis. After the crisis, she dreamed of improving upon the original Omnic designs, but Overwatch's restrictions on the artificial intelligence research and development forced her to limit the parameters of her new Echo project. Instead, she created a multi-role adaptive robot that could be programmed to learn different functions, anything from medical support to construction, but had serious limits to its independent decision-making, including multiple layers of protections, failsafes, and security to keep it under control. The truth was that Liao had programmed Echo with a powerful, general artificial intelligence that learned by observation. After thousands of hours in the scientist's presence, much of Liao's behaviors, including her speech, were adopted by the Echo robot. This secret was known by very few, including Blackwatch agent Cole Cassidy, who had, at times, been assigned to guard the scientist. When Liao was killed in an attack on an Overwatch facility, Overwatch's leadership feared the potential of such a robot without Liao's careful stewardship. All development on Echo was shut down, and the robot was placed into quarantine. Having been freed by Cole Cassidy from an attempted heist by the Deadlock gang, Echo joined up with the new Overwatch team to defend Paris against the Null Sector incursion. For the first time, Echo is seeing action as a full-fledged team member. But as she is exposed to new people, new ideas, and new situations without Dr. Liao to guide her, no one knows how she might evolve in the future. As the youngest son of the master of the Shimada clan, Genji was raised in the art of the sword. He trained under the swordmaster Asa Yamagami, forming a friendship with her young daughter Kiriko. Genji had little interest in the family's illegal businesses and spent most of his time pursuing a playboy lifestyle. Many within the clan considered the carefree Genji to be a dangerous liability, and they resented his father for coddling and protecting him. Following the clan leader's untimely death, Genji's older brother, Hanzo, demanded that Genji take a more active role in their late father's empire. Genji refused, enraging Hanzo. The tension between the brothers built to a violent confrontation that left Genji on the verge of death. Hanzo believed that he had killed his brother, but Genji was rescued by Overwatch and the intervention of Dr. Angela Ziegler. As Genji's injuries left him clinging to life, Overwatch offered to rebuild his body in exchange for his help. He was put through an extensive process of cyberization, which enhanced his natural speed and agility and augmented his superlative ninja skills. Transformed into a living weapon, Genji joined Blackwatch and single-mindedly set about the task of dismantling his family's criminal empire. When this mission was complete, he moved on to more complex duties and even took part in the notorious Venice incident, which led to Blackwatch's public exposure and the team's suspension. Overwatch leadership encouraged Genji to continue with agent training for the larger Overwatch Strike team, and he graduated alongside Tracer and Winston. But when Overwatch fell from grace, Genji felt increasingly at war with himself. For the second time, he abandoned his former life and wandered the world in search of meaning before crossing paths with the Omnic monk Zenyatta. In time, Zenyatta became his mentor, and under the monk's tutelage, Genji came to see both his experiences and his cybernetic form as a gift and a unique strength. Now the master of his own fate, Genji chooses to lend his skills to Overwatch once more, returning to aid a world in crisis alongside his former comrades and any who join their cause. As the eldest son of the family's head, Hanzo Hanzo was bound by duty to succeed his father and rule the Shimada Empire. From a young age, he was trained for that responsibility, displaying a natural aptitude for leadership and possessing an innate understanding of strategy and tactics. He also excelled in more practical areas. He was a prodigy in martial arts, swordplay, and bowmanship, having trained under the swordmaster Asa Yamagami, mother of Kiriko Komori. Upon the death of his father, the clan elders instructed Hanzo to straighten out his wayward younger brother, Genji, so that he too might help rule the Shimada Empire. When Genji refused, Hanzo was forced to kill him. This act broke Hanzo's heart and drove him to reject his father's legacy, ultimately leading him to abandon the clan and all that he worked so hard to attain. Many years after Genji's death, the two crossed paths and fought in their childhood home of the Shimada Castle, which had long since been seized by the Hashimoto clan. Genji told Hanzo he had forgiven him and urged Hanzo to forgive himself. Amid new turmoil in their native Hanamura and around the world, the time may soon come when Hanzo must choose a side, and now it seems he is trying to heal his past with help from Kiriko. The attack on the Australian Onion's fusion core forever altered the landscape of the outback. After the detonation, the area was transformed into a harsh, irradiated wasteland, littered with debris and the twisted fragments of the ruined facility, and unlivable to most. But there were some who survived. Calling themselves the Junkers, they scavenged the husk of the Onion and formed a lawless, cutthroat society in its shadow. Junkrat was one of them, and like many others, he was affected by the lingering radiation. This touch of madness made him ideal for handling dangerous explosives. A love he turned into an obsession. He came to notoriety when he discovered an extremely valuable secret in the bones of the Omnium. Though few knew the nature of what he found, he was nonetheless pursued by bounty hunters, gangs, and opportunists wherever he went, until he made a deal with the Junker enforcer Roadhog, who grudgingly agreed to his personal bodyguard in exchange for a 50-50 share of the spoils. After a string of offenses against the Junker Queen, Junkrat and Roadhog were officially exiled from Junkertown. They turned their sights beyond the outback to embark on an international crime spree, leaving nothing but havoc and badlam in their wake. Though they racked up the considerable bounty on their heads, they've been able to evade capture through the very same methods they've used to acquire such a bounty, mainly those involving loads and loads of bombs. With escalating climate phenomena ravaging environments around the globe, Overwatch established a series of eco-points at remote, critical locations worldwide. Their mission was to study ecological challenges and provide solutions for stabilizing or reversing its most pressing issues. Ailing Zhou was a member of this multi-year initiative. A peerless climatologist, he was assigned to the program's monitoring station at Eco-Point Antarctica when disaster struck. A sudden, catastrophic polar storm battered the installation and cut it off from the outside world, leaving the facility damaged and the scientists stranded. As their supplies dwindled, they entered cryostasis to survive until supply lines could be re-established or a rescue attempt could be made. But that rescue never came. It was years later when the team's cryogenics chamber finally opened. Mei was the team's only survivor. The world Mei woke up in had gone through considerable changes. Overwatch was no more. The serious climate issues had worsened, and none of the eco points were in operation. But there was hope. Upon reconnecting to the outside world, Mei received Winston's Overwatch recall missive. She joined up with Winston and Tracer at Watchpoint Gibraltar and decided to continue climatology work, pending a public journal that detailed her experience. Equipped with a portable version of her climate manipulation technology, Mei put her personal mission on hold to support the reformed Overwatch team in halting the devastating attack by Null Sector on the city of Paris. With her incredible technology and her sharp mind, Mei tries to build a future that protects both the planet and the people who call it home. As a child, Maria dreamed of following in her mother's footsteps and joining the global peacekeeping force, Overwatch. Her mother, Anna Amari, was second in command of the organization, though she desired a different life for her daughter, one free from fighting. Still, Pharah enlisted in the Egyptian army, and her dog presence and tactical prowess caused her to rise through the officer ranks. With her exemplary record, Pharah was well placed to join the ranks of Overwatch. But before she had the opportunity, her mother was killed in the line of duty, and Overwatch was disbanded soon after. After leaving the army with a commendation for distinguished service, Pharah was offered employment with Helix Security International, a private security firm contracted to defend the artificial intelligence research facility beneath the Giza Plateau. The top-secret facility was touted as vital to the safety of not only the region but countries across the globe, as it housed the remains of the rogue god program Anubis. Pharah gladly accepted the choice assignment and received training in the Raptura Mark VI, an experimental combat suit designed for rapid mobility and devastating firepower. Under the call sign Pharah, she worked to safeguard the AI installation. Years after her mother's death, Pharah was shocked to receive a letter from Anna, stating that she was alive, but unable to return to her. Pharah was confused, angry, and disappointed. Anna's pattern of choosing her mission over her daughter had damaged Pharah's trust in her. Pharah had grieved her mother's death once, and this felt like losing her again. Despite her lingering hurt, Pharah had her mission, and Anna had hers. Pharah had also let go of her childhood dreams of joining Overwatch, proud of what she had built with Helix. She turned down multiple requests from Tracer, Brigitte, and Reinhardt to answer Winston's recall. It was only when Cole Cassidy arrived in Cairo that she seriously considered joining. Cassidy brought Anna and Pharah together in an emotional reunion that both reopened and healed many old wounds. When Cassidy called on Pharah to back up the nation Overwatch on a mission to counter Null Sector in Busan, she answered the call. Now the Helix hero has expanded her horizons, lending her impressive skill set to rebuild the peacekeeping agency she once idolized. Gabriel Reyes joined the United States army at a young age, hoping to stop crime at its core, and was highly respected, making his way up the ranks. The United States Army started doing the soldier enhancement program, making its soldiers into super soldiers, and Gabriel Reyes was now Soldier 24. Another one of these soldiers was Jack Morrison, or Soldier 76. He became good friends with Gabriel, and when Overwatch was formed by the UN, they both joined. Reyes was a little reluctant since he preferred to operate behind the scenes, but still joined as the first person to accept and became its strike commander. Morrison got a higher position and improved on making a shadow organization called Blackwatch Reyes could lead. Blackwatch carried out Black Ops missions with assassins and mercenaries, and were done in private. One day, Overwatch captured town leader Doomfist, and he started to convince Reyes that what he was doing wasn't helping the wider world. Reyes was always skeptical, but this was one of the major turning points. The Blackwatch missions he was doing started to become known to the public, and many arguments between him and Morrison started happening at HQ, causing a split within the base. Most notable being when a whole explosion happened as they were fighting. It is still not known what caused this explosion, but Reyes barely survived, and woke up to see scientist Dr. Adorian injecting him with chemicals. These chemicals gave him the ability to completely manipulate his form into different states of matter. He was left in a constant state of agony, but at the end of the day, Moira had saved him, and he was intrigued by the powers. Reaper roamed the streets committing acts of terrorism for 6 years, and was often seen attempting to hunt former agents of Overwatch as an act of vengeance, blaming them for what he became. He ended up joining Talon seeing as they aligned with his goals, and allowed people to pretty much act on their own agendas. Reaper now continues to work for Talon as a husk of his former self, and it's ruthless to any who get in his way. Vivian Chase was born with a rare terminal autoimmune disease that caused her body to attack its own organs. Vivian spent much of her childhood and teenage years in and out of hospitals. Her parents had gotten her interested in military strategy from a young age, so she spent hours reading books and playing strategy simulations while recovering from various surgical procedures. Her case eventually caught the attention of Elaine Assat, a doctor pioneering a highly experimental treatment for Vivian's disease. As part of the treatment, Vivian had her affected organs and limbs replaced with state-of-the-art cybernetic ones. The treatments gave Vivian a new life. Vivian followed in her parents' footsteps and became an officer in the Canadian Armed Forces, where she gained a reputation as a tactical ace. At the start of the Omnic Crisis, she was conscripted into Special Forces. Her daring strategies, which often played out deep behind enemy lines, saved countless lives, and her squad nicknamed her Sojourn. When Canada was in its darkest hour, Vivian's unit partnered with the nascent Overwatch, working with Jack Morrison, Corbin Lindholm, and Dr. Mina Liao to push the Omnic forces out of Toronto. Vivian received numerous commendments for heroism and leadership, but after the war, she still felt her mission wasn't over. She requested a transfer to a counter-terrorism unit with the Canadian Special Forces, where she helped with the takedown of Ontario United, an anti-Omnic hate group. Morrison recruited her into Overwatch with the promise that her position could make a global difference. She soon gained a reputation as an empathetic, clear-headed tactician with an exponential concern for the people she led into battle. Vivian spent a considerable amount of time with Overwatch's ground troops as well, and over time, she became one of Overwatch's most trusted leaders. However, the longer Vivian spent with Overwatch, the less satisfied she became with its politics. She felt that the organization had lost its way. She said as much when the United Nations launched an internal investigation of Overwatch, which culminated in a series of public hearings. Vivian spoke truthfully about her experiences, and her testimony proved pivotal in passing the Petrus Act and ending Overwatch. After the hearings, Vivian settled into early, uneasy retirement with her rescue dog, Murphy. But Vivian Chase was still suspected of fighting as a vigilante, and was almost arrested for it until realized her skills were needed for fighting Null Sector. Eventually, the recalled Overwatch arrived in her neck of the woods too, and she offered to help them. Even so, she still told them she didn't answer Winston's recall for a reason, and wouldn't be joining officially after Null Sector was dealt with. Soldier 76 revealed himself in a string of attacks that crisscrossed the globe, targeting financial institutions, shadowy corporations, and secure Overwatch facilities. Though to the outside world his motives are inscrutable, there are those who claim that he is a former Overwatch agent determined to shed light on the conspiracy that brought down the organization. Few would believe that former Overwatch strike commander Jack Morrison is the face behind Soldier 76, given that Morrison was presumed dead during the destruction of Overwatch Swiss headquarters. But the hardened veteran survived, perhaps due to the fact that he was biologically enhanced and trained as a member of the United States Soldier Enhancement Program, a top secret agency which surfaced only during the most desperate hour of the Omnic Crisis. As such, Morrison possesses physical capabilities exceeding those of a conventional soldier, as well as other augmentations that make him a peerless combatant. In addition, he utilizes a cutting-edge arsenal, much of it stolen in raids on Overwatch installations. Though Morrison did intercept Winston's Overwatch recall broadcast, he remains singularly focused on his hunt for vengeance. The search for answers goes on. Soldier 76 is unrelenting in his search to find those responsible for Overwatch's fall and bring them to justice. Olivia Colmar was among the millions of children who were left orphaned in the aftermath of the Omnic Crisis. With much of her country's infrastructure destroyed, she survived by utilizing her natural gifts with hacking and computers. After Olivia was taken in by Mexico's Los Muertos gang, she aided in its self-styled revolution against the government. Los Muertos believed that the rebuilding of Mexico had primarily benefited the rich and the influential, leaving behind those who were in need of assistance. Following her many conquests, Olivia was supremely confident in her skills, but she was caught unprepared when she stumbled into a web of global conspiracy, one that had also noticed her. With her security irreparably compromised, Olivia was forced to delete all traces of her identity and go into hiding. She later re-emerged as Sombra, upgraded and determined to find out the truth behind the conspiracy she had uncovered. Sombra launched an even more audacious string of hacks, and her exploits earned her no shortage of admirers, including talent. She joined the organization's ranks and contributed to massive cyber attacks against corporations with strong ties to the government. The Volskaya mission in particular highlighted Sombra's questionable allegiances, going rogue on an assassination mission against the company's CEO. Sombra blackmailed her instead. Once Doomfist released himself from prison and reworked Talon's inner council, Sombra played an important part in the renewed organization, which, more importantly, brought her a few steps closer to her own goal. Olivia led digital terrorism efforts that directly enabled Doomfist to complete his missions in high-value areas such as Rome and Numbani. Whatever services she provides for Talon, only a fool would forget that Sombra's agenda is her own. But while Sombra remains on the hunt for her prey, Talon gets the best hacker money can't buy. Following the Omnic Crisis, the Vishkar Corporation of Southern India began the laborious process for creating new, self-sustaining cities to house the nation's displaced population. One such city, Utopia, was created using radical hardlight technology that enabled its architects to shape the city's streets, utilities, and living spaces in the blink of an eye. After she was identified as one of the few capable of becoming a light-benching architect, young Satya Vaswani was plucked from extreme poverty and placed in the care of Vishkar's Architect Academy, never to return home. Isolated and lonely in her new life, Satya immersed herself in her education and training. She quickly grasped the applications of the technology and was one of the top students in her class. Though she was one of Utopia's top architects, the Vishkar Corporation saw far greater potential in Satya's abilities, giving her the Monkir Symmetra. Vishkar sent her on clandestine missions around the world to uphold its corporate interests and expand its influence into other countries. One of these missions was in Suravasa, where Vishkar construction had caused a tremor that damaged a statue at a local temple. In a peacekeeping measure, Vishkar sent its top architect to repair the damages. Instead of providing a mere symbolic gesture, Symmetra spent time with Tekartha, Zenyatta, and other Shimbali pilgrims residing there. Her experience with the Shimbali inspired her to repair a damaged statue with her unique weaving of hardlight and original material. Symmetra believes her actions, and those of Vishkar, serve the greater good of society. She still questions them often, but no Vishkar gives her the greatest reach to protect those in need. Before the Omnic Crisis, Torbjörn had gained notoriety for designing weapon systems used by countries around the world. Torbjörn had a deep mistrust of sentient robotic intelligence, and while many of his peers wrote this off as paranoia, his worst fears were realized when the robot populations around the world turned against their human creators during the Omnic Crisis. Because of his engineering genius, he joined the original Overwatch strike team, and his many inventions proved integral to ending the crisis. In the aftermath of Overwatch's fall, many of Torbjörn's weapons, from his days in Overwatch and long before, were stolen or stashed away around the world. He pursued the misuse of his weapons wherever they occurred, but not all of his weapons have come to bad ends. In his native Sweden, Torbjörn came face to face with an oddly peaceful Bastion unit that threw his jaded perspective into disarray. This once lethal killing machine had befriended local wildlife, inexplicably growing beyond its original wartime protocols. Torbjörn adopted the curious Bastion unit, and their close relationship led the engineer to question his antipathy towards robots, AI, and Omnics. Null Sector had led a major attack on Sweden, and Overwatch arrived just in time to help Torb fend them off. He was offered a place within the recalled Overwatch, but denied wanting to stay with his family. Still, he offered Bastion a place within the group. Lena Oxton, call sign Tracer, was the youngest person ever inducted into Overwatch's experimental flight program. Known for her fearless piloting skills, she was handpicked to test the prototype of a teleporting fighter, the Slipstream, but during its first flight, the aircraft's teleportation matrix malfunctioned, and it disappeared. Lena was presumed dead. She reappeared months later, but her ordeal had greatly changed her. Her molecules had been desynchronized from the flow of time. Suffering from chrono disassociation, she was a living ghost, disappearing for hours and days at a time. Overwatch's doctors and scientists were stumped, and Tracer's case seemed hopeless until Winston designed the Chrono Accelerator, a device capable of keeping Tracer anchored in the present. In addition, it gave Tracer the ability to control her own time, allowing her to speed it up and slow it down at will. With her newfound skills, she became one of the Overwatch's most effective agents. Following the disbandment of Overwatch, Tracer was dissatisfied with her quiet life, replacing heroism with a desk job in the Royal Air Force. When an Omnic with possible ties to Null Sector stepped forward to rally the Omnics in the underworld in a full-blown revolution against humans, it was only through the combined efforts of Tracer, Winston, and Iggy that no one else was hurt. Though she was grievously wounded in the process, Tracer can always be counted on to bounce back. With the help of Winston and her partner Emily, Tracer made a full recovery, rejoining Winston and answering his Overwatch Overwatch's recall broadcast. So and Cameron had an affinity for finding lost things since they were a child. Their unusual talent drew them to the Wayfinder Society, a group of archaeologists and historians from around the globe. At 16, they started an apprenticeship with the organization and never looked back. From ancient ruins to dominant omniums, dangerous expeditions quickly became their go-to assignments. Their dedication eventually saw them graduate from their apprenticeship, making them a full-fledged member of the Wayfinder Society. With increasing threats to the Wayfinder sites, security often fell into their hands. Looters, scavengers, and even master thieves would try to steal artifacts recovered by the Wayfinders. But with their excavating tools and quick wit, someone managed to fend off any would-be troublemakers. In her former life, growing up in her family's ancestral seat of Chateau Guillard in rural France, dance became Emile's only escape from the crumbling manor and her conservative family. Her path would take a more interesting turn when she married the great love of her life, Gerard Lacroix, an Overwatch agent spearheading operations against the Talon terrorist organization. Emile gave little thought to her husband's career outside of the interesting topic it made for dinner parties. He could have hardly guessed at the danger his job put her in. After several unsuccessful attempts to eliminate Gerard, Talon decided to change its focus to his wife. In the dead of night, Talon operatives kidnapped Emilia and subjected her to an intense program of neural reconditioning, in effect creating a sleeper agent. Gerard devoted Overwatch's every resource to recovering his bride, and it wasn't long before the operation produced results. His agent saved Emilia, and a medical and psychological evaluation after the kidnapping found her to be apparently no worse for wear. Their official assessment proved fatally inaccurate 2 weeks later, and they discovered she had killed Gerard in his sleep. Afterward, Emilia was hunted by the police and Overwatch alike, but more than that, she was haunted by the way of murdering her husband had made her feel. The moment of the kill was the most alive Emilia had ever felt. With few other options left, Emilia returned to Talon, chasing the high that had both thrilled and terrified her. At her behest, she was given extensive training in the covert arts and agreed to participate in an experimental marksman program. Talon's geneticist, Moira Dorian, altered Emilia's physiology to improve her aim, drastically slowing her heart, which turned her skin cold and blue, and numbed her ability to experience human emotion. It dulled the pain of what she had done, while heightening the charge she felt on the hunt. Now as Widowmaker, she is Talon's most effective assassin. An unstoppable killer, Widowmaker's crosses are perhaps the most dangerous place in the world. As the Omnic Crisis inflicted a heavy toll on Egypt, the country's depleted and undermanned armed forces relied on elite snipers for support. Among them was Ana Amari, who was widely considered to be the world's best. Her superior marksmanship, decision-making, and instincts made her a natural selection to join the Overwatch strike team that would end the war. Ana served for many years as Strike Commander Morrison's second-in-command. Despite her responsibilities in leading the organization, Ana refused to step away from combat operations. She remained on active duty well into her 50s, until she was believed to have been killed during a hostage rescue mission by the Talon operative known as Widowmaker. In truth, Ana survived that encounter, despite being gravely wounded and losing her right eye. During her recovery, she wrestled with the weight of a life spent in combat, and she chose to stay out of the world's growing conflicts. However, as time passed, she realized she could not sit in the sidelines while people threatened her city and the innocents around her. Ana rejoined the fight, this time as a healer, and dedicated herself to monitoring global security threats. Prior to disrupting Talon operations in Cairo, she intercepted an unlikely broadcast, the Overwatch recall from her former friend, Winston. Ana remained uncertain about the recall, but she had decided to help her comrades from the shadows. She sent word to Cole Cassidy, knowing that he had survived the demise of Overwatch and returned as a gunslinger for hire. Ana knew that the organization needed new blood. People like Cassidy and her daughter, Pharah, were it to stand a chance, and worried the old guard would only poison the agency's return. She shared as much with her daughter in an overdue reunion, before embarking on her own mission with Soldier 76. With no regrets left, Ana travels the world tracking down Talon and the ghosts that haunt her former allies. And while she didn't rejoin Overwatch, Ana keeps her eye on the exploits, just in case. Jean-Baptiste Augustin was one of the 30 million children orphaned by the Omnic Crisis. With limited opportunities and resources, he enlisted in the military. Guided by his innate desire to help people, Baptiste chose the path of a combat medic and served in the elite branch of the Caribbean Coalition's Special Ops. After his service was complete, Baptiste struggled to find a demand for his unique skills. He turned to one of the few opportunities open to him, joining the Talon Mercenary Group, one of the many organizations that were poised to profit off the chaos of the war's aftermath. Talon's missions were easy and paid well, and he put aside some of his earnings to set up a clinic in his hometown. Slowly, his unit's orders escalated into brutality, expanding into assassinations and operations with civilian casualties. He abandoned Talon, disgusted with what he had done and determined to forge a new path for himself. But Talon would not let him go. Baptiste knew too much, and he sent operatives to silence him. Agent after agent came after him. The few Talon members who managed to track him down were never seen again. After years on the run, Baptiste returned to his native Haiti to help the clinic he co-founded, an action that allowed Talon to spring a carefully laid trap. Mauga and Trung, fellow Talon soldiers, urged Baptiste to accompany them on a mission to shake down a local businessman, or fight and die now. To survive, Baptiste agreed, but when Baptiste found out the man had valuable intel about Overwatch, he saved him. His old friend Mauga gave Baptiste one final chance to return to Talon outside of a body bag, but he refused, escaping with the valuable intel. The list of names and locations to which Winston had broadcasted Overwatch's recall. The hit list of known and likely Overwatch agents spurred Baptiste to warn those unfortunate enough to find their names on it, beginning with Dr. Angela Ziegler. In his efforts to locate Ziegler, Baptiste instead crossed paths with a suspicious Cassidy on his mission to recruit global heroes for a renewed Overwatch. As Cassidy and Baptiste fell within Talon's crosshairs, their chance encounter and unlikely partnership gave Baptiste a chance at the redemption he sought. Baptiste now works toward a better world in Overwatch, healing where he can and fighting when he must. He knows that he cannot undo his past, but that making a difference now is what matters. The youngest daughter of weapons designer Torbjörn Lindholm, Brigitte was one of his first children to show an interest in mechanical engineering. Brigitte spent much of her spare time in her father's workshop, learning the trade and honing her skills. Brigitte's primary interest was in armor fabrication and defensive systems. Everyone expected that Brigitte would continue her apprenticeship and follow in her father's footsteps, but her plans changed due to her influence of another prominent figure in her life, her father's fellow Overwatch agent, Reinhardt Wilhelm, a close friend of the family and Brigitte's godfather. Reinhardt told Brigitte of tales of heroes and chivalry as she grew up. After his retirement in Overwatch's fall, Reinhardt declared that he would become a knight errant on a quest to bring justice. Before he left on his adventures, Brigitte surprised him by asking to join him as his squire. Reinhardt accepted. As a squire, Brigitte had many responsibilities, the most important of which was the upkeep of Reinhardt's Crusader armor. But more and more, she found her main job was taking care of Reinhardt himself. Brigitte realized that serving only as a mechanic wasn't enough, and the best way she could continue on their journey was to become a warrior in her own right. While Reinhardt trained her in combat, Brigitte built her own suit of armor. While hesitant to join at first, the Overwatch recall brought them from the ruins of Eichenwald to the streets of Paris, where Brigitte fought at Reinhardt's side to protect him and any others in need from the ravages of Null Sector. No matter what threats they face, Knight and Squire continued their journey to make the world a better place, one battle at a time. Illari began the demanding anti-warrior training at an early age. Even then, her potential was enormous. Her trainers believed she would become the strongest warrior of her time. She bowed to the desires of her community, dedicating her free time to training so that one day she might live up to the legend already growing around her. Finally, her hard work and sacrifices paid off. She became the youngest person to join the anti-warriors. In order to store and control the sun's power, each anti-warrior was imbued with solar threading. As per tradition, the anti-warriors all gathered for Illari's augmentation ceremony, ready to welcome her with open arms. However, no one could have been prepared for the true extent of her power. Her procedure unleashed a devastating amount of solar energy from her body, causing a blast that destroyed the entire chamber. The anti-warriors were gone, and so was the future Illari had spent her entire life preparing for. Unable to face anyone after the tragedy, Illari has isolated herself, refusing anyone's sympathy. She replays the accident over and over in her head, unable to help but wonder whether things could have been different if she had never been pressured to strive for greatness. With no other clear path to follow, Illari continues her daily training despite having no one to guide her. Over time, one thing is made painfully clear. She's the last anti-warrior, and she must face the world alone. After the successful establishment of the Horizon Lunar Colony, Lúcio Interstellar set its sights on a new frontier, Mars. Though their initial proposal for the project was denied by the UN, Lúcio kept its plans in motion, forming a group of scientists and engineers in secret. Codenamed Project Red Promise, these brave individuals would pave the way to a new world, a new home for humanity. The first phases of the project went smoothly, and the Red Promise team successfully established the first Martian base within a matter of months. What none of the team expected was the birth of baby Juno. Juno was the first human born on Mars, the first Martian. She embodied the hopes of the project, and each member of the Red Promise team loved her as if she was their own. Over time, she grew from a starry-eyed child into the most proficient navigator in the colony. As the Red Promise team continued to terraform the planet, they faced unforeseen repercussions. There were altercations to the planet's surface that kicked soil and debris into the atmosphere, resulting in dust storms that grew more violent year after year. To make matters worse, their attempts to contact Lúcio Interstellar received no response, and the second wave of the Project Red Promise never arrived. Not knowing when, or if, assistance might come from Earth, the scientists had to confront the truth. The colony's days were numbered, as were their own. The years spent living on the planet had left the Red Promise team with only enough resources to guarantee a single person's safe journey to Earth. There was no question of who would make that trip: Juno. She pleaded with her parents not to make her leave, but they remained steadfast in their desire. After all, she embodied their hope for the future of humanity. But Juno was not one to give up on the only home and family she'd ever known. Rather than seeing her departure as an evacuation, she made her a mission to find help on Earth. With solemn goodbyes, Juno tearfully left the danger of her home planet, knowing there was a chance she would never see her family again. She promised herself that she'd find someone who could help her save everyone, before it was too late. When reaching Earth, she was contacted by the recalled Overwatch, who brought her in with open arms. The climatologist named Dr. Malin happened to be part of the recalled Overwatch, and Juno knew her as her mother's old friend. With no other leads, she's hoping May and Overwatch can bring her family home. Kiriko's childhood was shaped by the many powerful figures in her life. Her father was a famous bladesmith for the Shimada, and her mother, Ashe, was their swordmaster. As such, Kiriko trained alongside Hanzo and Genji Shimada. Kiriko was treated like family with the Shimadas, but Kiriko's peaceful world would soon be shattered. When she was 12 years old, the head of the clan, Sojourn Shimada, was assassinated by the rival Hashimoto clan. As rumors raged in Hanamura and Kanazaka regarding the supposed demise of Genji and flight of Hanzo, the Hashimoto took over. The Hashimoto recognized the potential threat posed by Kiriko's family and acted quickly, kidnapping Kiriko's father and forcing him to supply weapons weapons for the clan. Alone and with her hands tied, Asa was unable to fight back. To protect her daughter, she sent Kiriko to her grandmother and changed her family name to Komori, Asa's given name. Under her grandmother's care, Kiriko forged a close and lasting connection to the fox spirit, serving as a shrine maiden. But by the time beloved grandmother passed away, Kiriko had caught on to her parents' predicament, and to the spreading pain the Hashimoto were inflicting on Kanezaka. Witnessing years of the Hashimoto's injustice, Kiriko vowed to restore peace to her town. A group of young troublemakers calling themselves the Yokai of Hanamura were also doing what they could to hinder the clan, mostly through minor vandalism. With Kiriko's intelligence and natural leadership newly added in, the Yokai became more and more of a thorn in the Hashimoto's side. They ambushed Hashimoto businesses, disrupted supply lines, and constantly undermined them through strategic attacks. But no matter how hard the Hashimoto press, the Yokai seemed to slip through their fingers. Perhaps this is the citizens of Kanezaka protecting their own, or perhaps the small game really are as powerful as the spirits to whom they take their name. Wherever the truth lies, Kiriko continues to fight, both for the peace the Hashimoto stole from her long ago, and for a future free of fear for the people of Kanezaka. Born in Chiang Mai, Thailand, Niran was the middle child of extremely wealthy parents with high expectations for their children. From a young age, he resisted the structured life they had planned for him. He preferred wandering his compound's vast walled garden, mending plants alongside his family's gardeners. Even early on, he was too intelligent for the expensive schools his family could afford. He often completed assignments incorrectly, his teachers often complained, by solving problems more thoroughly than was necessary, or in new ways that hinted at his brilliant future. His parents, desperate to instill order in Niran, sent him to the prestigious Vishkar Architect Academy. Niran developed an almost immediate distaste for both the rigid, artificial beauty the Vishkar called perfection. All of the other students shunned him, save one, his roommate Satya Vaswani, later known as Symmetra. As he grew older, during breaks at school, he used his parents' wealth to travel and learn about his true passion, the natural world. In those journeys, he was struck by the turmoil that existed outside of this perfect bubble of wealth. All around the world, people needed help. Illness, injury, and many other alignments riddled communities with pain, and pain Niran grew determined to fix. Using the Academy's resources and his parents' influence, Niran set about his own project, one that would help him heal the world. In his research, he discovered that the late founder of Vishkar had hoped to provide his hardlight freely to the world before Vishkar implemented more restrictions to the technology. Using this original design and his fascination with botany, he created something new. While hardlight made inanimate material, Niran's new and unstable invention, BioLight, created organic material that could heal terrible wounds in the blink of an eye. Unfortunately, that was where Niran's problems began. Like his visionary predecessor, Niran dreamed of giving BioLight to the world. Vishkar disagreed, claiming ownership of the invention. Ignoring their demands, and Satya's advice, he fled the academy with the nascent technology. His parents cut him off their wealth and pleaded for him to return, turn over his technology, and make peace with Vishkar. Alone and haunted, Niran was turned to the Atlantic Arcology, a freestanding and self-sustaining scientific and ecological city in the Atlantic Ocean, free from the governing laws of any nation on the planet. There, Lifeweaver has continued stabilizing and perfecting BioLight, and intends to use it to renew the world's connection with nature and help those in need. Lúcio grew up in Rio de Janeiro, in a poor and crowded favela that was hit hard by the financial upheaval following the Omnic crisis. As Brazil began the long process of recovery, he wanted to find a way to lift the spirits of those around him. He found his answer in music and its power to bring people together and even help them forget their troubles, if only for a short time. But Lucio's close-knit community was thrown into chaos when the multinational Vishkar Corporation secured a contract to redevelop large tracts of the city. Vishkar imposed controls on the residents in the name of building a more orderly society, enforcing curfews, cracking down on what the company perceived as lawless behavior, and exploiting the populace as a cheap labor force. Lúcio wouldn't stand for it. He seized the Vishkar sonic technology that his father had helped develop, technology that was now being used to suppress the people, and converted it into a tool to rally them into action. In a popular uprising, they drove Vishkar out of their neighborhoods. Lúcio's leadership made him a star overnight, and a symbol of positive social change. His music skyrocketed in popularity. As he once performed locally, he was now filling arenas across the world. Things turned into chaos once more, however, when Null Sector attacked his hometown. Lúcio was attempting to protect it on his own with his father's sonic tech to minimal success, but Overwatch came in and helped out Lúcio drive away Null Sector. Always seeking positive change, Lúcio gets offered a spot within Overwatch that he gladly accepts. Angela Ziegler had pioneered a breakthrough in the field of applied and nanobiology at a young age. The technology radically improved the treatment of life-threatening illnesses and injuries. It was this expertise that attracted the attention of Overwatch. Because her parents had been taken by war, Ziegler was opposed to the organization's militaristic approach to keeping global peace. Ultimately, she recognized that Overwatch offered her the opportunity to save lives on a much larger scale. As Overwatch's head of medical research, Ziegler sought to leverage her work for healing in the frontline crisis. The result was the Valkyrie Swift response suit, which Ziegler herself piloted on many Overwatch missions. Despite her contributions to Overwatch, she was often at odds with her superiors and the organization's overarching aims. When Overwatch dissolved, Zarya sought distance from the agency and rededicated herself to helping those affected by war, caring for the broken and disposed in crisis areas around the world. Following the Overwatch recall, 2 squadmates she had thought to have been dead and gone revived at her doorstep, Jack Morrison and Anna Amari. Zarya's feelings on the return of Overwatch were further complicated, seeing Morrison's obsession with chasing vengeance for the agency's fall from grace. Yet, when Talon forces descended on Cairo, Mercy appeared without fail, to protect the city's civilians alongside her old teammates. Although she, Solar 76, and Anna Amari had since parted ways, the events in Cairo rekindled a sense of heroism that Zarya had thought to be long buried. With Null Sector's targeted attack on Paris, it was clear that Overwatch was needed once again to defend the world from threats to peace. Now knowing her battle is not yet over, Mercy has since returned to Overwatch, and can be counted on to don her Valkyrie suit whenever innocents are imperiled. Equal parts brilliant and controversial, scientist Moira Adorian is on the cutting edge of genetic engineering, searching for a way to rewrite the fundamental building blocks of life. Over a decade ago, Moira made waves when she published a controversial paper detailing a methodology for creating custom genetic programs that could alter DNA at a cellular level. It seemed like a promising step toward overcoming diseases and disorders and maximizing human potential. Many considered her work to be dangerous because of its perceived ethical shortfalls, and Moira was even accused of having the same unchecked desire for scientific advancement that some believed had caused the Omnic crisis. In addition, other geneticists were unable to reproduce the results of Moira's research, which further called her discoveries into question. Instead of kick-starting her career, her paper seriously damaged her reputation. She received a lifeline and an offer from an unlikely source, Overwatch's covert ops division, Blackwatch. She continued her work in the shadows while developing new weapons and technologies for the organization, including experiments conducted directly on Commander Gabriel Reyes. Her employment was a closely kept secret, until it was uncovered during inquiries following the Venice incident. Many high-ranking Overwatch officials disavowed all knowledge of her affiliation with them. After Overwatch, Moira was forced to turn to unconventional sources of funding. She continued to work as part of the shadowy Talon organization. While Moira worked at Talon in secret, she maintained appearances in the scientific community. She was invited to join the scientific collective that had founded the city of Oasis, becoming their Minister of Genetics. Though her work is still unknown to most of the world, Moira would go to any lengths for a scientific breakthrough. Years ago, following the Omnic crisis, a group of outcast Omnic robots, known as the Shambali monks, abandoned their pre-programmed lives to establish a communal monastery deep in the Himalayas. After many years of meditation on the nature of existence, they came to the belief that they are more than artificial intelligence and that, like humans, they possess the essence of a soul. Recognizing the spiritual equality they held with humans, the monks, led by their leader, Kartha Mandata, sought to heal the wounds caused by the Omnic crisis. Zenyatta was one such lost soul who embraced their message after meeting the monk Ramattra at a protest for Omnic equality. Ramattra saw in him great spiritual potential and offered him a place in Shambali. After some time at the Shambali monastery in Nepal, Zenyatta was able to help his own student find peace, the ex-Overwatch agent Genji Shimada. In time, Zenyatta helped his student see both his trials and his cybernetic form as a unique strength. After Genji left his tutelage, Zenyatta began to see the limits of the Shambali path. He believed the way to repair the problems between humans and Omnics was not through dogmatic teaching, but through interpersonal connection and engagement. Ultimately, Zenyatta followed his own path. He chose to leave the monastery and wander the world, helping those he met to overcome their personal struggles and find inner peace. Zenyatta continues to forge connections and impart knowledge worldwide, and when necessary, he will fight to protect the innocent, be they Omnic or human. And that's going to conclude the longest script I ever read. Thank you all for the support as always, and I hope you have a wonderful holiday season. Peace.
Rock skull. All you want to do is stream all night. Lobby full, rock skull. Never gonna play with me, but it's alright.